Good afternoon. I think we'll jump in and get started here with our next session. This is called Applying Generative Research and Innovation for Insurance. And today we have with us Ewan Dye, who's a senior behavioral researcher at Erie Insurance, where she discovers customer needs and creates innovative solutions for them. Prior to joining Erie, Ewan was a writer, editor, social science researcher, and higher education teacher. She comes to us from exotic Erie, Pennsylvania, which I'm going to put in a plug for Erie because I'm a frequent visitor there, given that I work for Erie Insurance, and it is beautiful in the summertime. And then also with us today is Mariah Mills. She has a Master of Industrial Design from Georgia Institute of Technology. She's been a service designer with Harmonic Design since October 2018. She began leading service design teams and mentoring new service designers in the summer of 2020. Mariah's favorite aspect of service design is the collaborative nature of the discipline. She believes the best ideas come from creative tensions with groups of people with differing viewpoints. And I'll also add that in her free time, she pursues her passion of music, playing the double bass. And she comes to us from Atlanta. So I will turn it over to the two of you to get started. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Getting our presentation pulled up here.
All right, hi everyone. Good. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ewan, as Pete introduced, and I'm a senior behavioral researcher at Erie, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, hi. And as Pete mentioned, my name is Mariah, and I'm a service design lead with Harmonic Design. We are very excited to be here today at the Society of Insurance Research and to speak with you a little bit about generative research. So Ewan and I are going to be talking with you today about the power of generative research to spur creativity and fresh new thinking when approaching business problems and opportunities in the insurance industry. But first, we want to do a quick brainstorm with you, and today's session will be a little interactive, so we're going to get started right off the bat. So if someone approached you at your company and asked you to give them some ideas about how to improve the claims experience, what's something that you can think of off the top of your head for that? And this is going to be a little interactive, so feel free to either put that in the Whova chat or even come off mute and shout out an answer to that as we get started here. If anyone feels like being a little interactive, settle the claim quickly. It's a good one. Any other ideas around improving the claims experience? At any company, I would say clear and simple language. We got that in the Whova chat. Let's see if we get any more. Broaden the way to initiate a claim. Yep, actually we got two people who came up with that idea at the same time. Oh, that was copied from the Q&A. Got it, okay. I thought it was like this really great moment of serendipity there. Ask the customer, what a great idea. We're gonna get into that. Cool, awesome. Well, those are some good ideas. That's a great start. And for anyone who's been working in insurance for a little while, you probably have many ideas about this, and they're definitely valuable, and I wouldn't want to discount that. But what we hope to demonstrate today is how generative research used within a design-centric innovation process can help you and your team get even more creative by seeing things through the eyes of a customer and taking what we refer to as an outside-in approach. So before we dive into research, I want to talk just a little bit about service design and innovation for insurance and how we do it. So Harmonic Design is an Atlanta-based service design company, and we have been collaborating really closely with the Erie Innovation team for over 2 years to bring service design and innovation practices to the greater Erie Insurance. And we're working together to pioneer what's next for Erie in a changing world and changing industry. And we work with partners, not just in the innovation team, but across the company to deeply understand the needs of the business, their partners, their customers, employees, design new experiences and value exchanges for all of those stakeholders, and implement changes in processes, policies, products, technology, and even culture. So that's a little bit of the scope of what service design and innovation touches. And you can see here on the slide, some of the things we actually do include envisioning whole new services, reimagining customer journeys with existing services, connecting dots across channels, aligning service experiences and operations, and also building those capabilities across the organization. So as I mentioned, we work with people from the claims team and the product team and bring everybody in. So that's a little bit about what we do, but I also wanted to elaborate on a little bit on how we do it and what it feels like to be doing innovation at Erie Insurance and working from a service design lens. So as I mentioned, our process is extremely participatory. We bring many people into our process in addition to the kind of research that we do with customers, employees, and others. It is based in human-centered design. So we call it a human-centered process, which really means to us that we are always trying to understand and align people's needs, expectations, and behaviors with whatever it is that we are creating new. And additionally, we don't look at just one touch point like the website or one experience that these actors might be having, but we focus on an entire customer journey end to end and front to back. So looking at both those experiences that happen between customers and those experiences that happen backstage at the company as well. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Yiwen to further elaborate a little bit on how the Erie Innovation Team does this and the role of research in general within their design practice.
Thank you, Mariah. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Erie Insurance innovation process to give you some context on when generative research happens at Erie Insurance and what purpose it serves. So the innovation team at Erie Insurance follows a standard 6-step design process. So the first step is called sense and scan. So this is where we look for problems to solve, look for opportunities to explore. So typically we do a combination of secondary research and primary research in this stage. And once we discover opportunities that we find exciting and promising, we put them in a pipeline where they wait to be worked on once the team is ready. So after the first step, sense and scan, we frame the opportunity space and then start preparing for our first official step, which is understand behavioral needs. So in this step, our primary goal is to deepen empathy for people we want to serve and to really understand their needs, their identity, their context, and their experiences. So typically what we do in this step is to do generative research. And we have a lot of in-depth interviews with participants in this step. And then once we have gathered some insights about what people need and what they want, we start asking ourselves what the solution could be. So in this step, develop ideas. The innovation team invites stakeholders who are relevant to the project to co-create some potential solutions with us. And we facilitate these sessions where creativity is really used to think about what are some innovative ways we can solve the problems that we heard. And going into the prototype and test concepts stage, this is where we really de-risk our solutions in a more controlled space. So we translate our ideas into coherent concepts where we bring them to our target audience and ask them for feedback. We typically show them very low fidelity feedback prototypes. So this could be a storyboard accompanied with some descriptions. And after this step, we eliminate ideas or refine ideas based on the feedback we heard. And going into the next step called rapid pilot and customer test. So this is where we further de-risk, but this time in a real world setting instead of in a more controlled interview context. So we really rapidly test to see if the solutions would work successfully in the real world with real customers. And after this step, if the solution still sounds exciting and desirable and feasible after all the tests, we start to accelerate the launch and preparing for scaling the solution. And so at E-Ray, we use a model to direct our work. It's called the balanced breakthrough model. So this is where we evaluate the viability. In other words, whether the solution makes business sense for E-Ray, and desirability, whether this is something that customers would want, and feasibility, whether E-Ray can successfully implement this solution either independently or through participation, through partnership with external partners. So as you can see, in different stages, we prioritize different criteria. For example, viability is really important in step 0 and a couple steps later. And desirability is really the center of the focus in understanding behavioral needs and testing concepts. And feasibility becomes increasingly more important as we go down the process. And you already heard me say that basically research happens everywhere in this step. So today we're going to focus on step 1, understanding behavioral needs, where generative research typically happens. So the innovation process takes that our team takes really takes us from kind of an ambiguity and chaotic space to a more to clarity and focus. So in the so this what you're seeing here is called a design squiggle. And at the beginning, where we are conducting research and synthesizing our insights, we can really go any directions, and we don't really have a set agenda here. And we're just really thoroughly exploring the problem space. And we get into the synthesis stage, we get more clarity. And then when we start prototyping and developing concepts, we have more and more clarity, and we're giving up some directions. And then as we move on to design, you finally get a very crisp line where we really have a focus and a nice concept for the customers. So today what we're going to discuss is generative research. So this is where we take a deeper look into the problem space. So this step happens after the initial exploratory space, where we really can go anywhere. So after we identify a problem space, after the exploratory research, we enter the generative phase. And generative research also happens before evaluative research, before we show any ideas, any potential solutions to the target audience to see what they think. Just to give you some perspective on where the research happens. So we already discussed one generative research happens. This is after problem space is identified and before the product is designed. And the participants for this kind of research typically consist of researchers, designers, and sometimes stakeholders. We always like to bring our stakeholders along to show them the process and have them and try to inspire some empathy for customers in them. So what we do here is to generate deep insights about people, and we don't really call them users, so trying to really see them as everyday person who have their own context, their needs, their experiences, and listen to them first before thinking of what they could use and what we can sell them. And the goal of this deep insights is to identify business opportunities and inform design. So there are many benefits of doing generative research. So first, it's build greater empathy for people whom you want to serve. So for example, at E-Ray Insurance, we really take pride in our agent-based model. But in our previous research, we had team members who design products but they design insurance product that they have never talked to customers directly. So through conversations with customers, they finally heard it for the first time why some people would prefer to skip the agent and then do things online directly. So having that perspective really help us improve the experiences that we provide. And it also helps us find new insights through serendipity. So I used to conduct a lot of questionnaire surveys in my graduate school studies, but I'm very comfortable about throwing things on the questionnaire, but you really, people can really only respond to what you put there. And so when you talk to people in conversations, you really get to discover things that you have never even thought of. And that serendipity is always what's really interesting about this kind of research and very helpful in terms of inspiring design. You also get buy-in from stakeholders by letting them participate in the research. So the sponsors, stakeholders, they have different preferences, different ways of thinking. So some people are more persuaded by numbers and statistics. And there are others who are really moved by the narratives. So by bringing these stakeholders into our conversations with customers, we really can see how the stories they heard change their perspectives. And then we hear them tell the stories again and again to the other colleagues, spreading this empathy through the organization. And we also help stakeholders incorporate insights to other aspects of their work. So as Mariah said, we work closely with people all around an organization. So this empathy that got inspired from these conversations and the insight that they heard can really be applied into their daily work that's not related to innovation. So we typically do generative research through interviews, but you can also do it through diary studies or internet ethnography or in-person ethnography. All right, with that said, I'm going to hand it back to Mariah, who's going to lead us through an activity where you get to try some generative research techniques.
Yeah, thanks, Ewan. So now that you've heard a little bit about what it is and how we use generative research in the innovation process, we're going to give you a chance to do a little practice. So we are bringing to you today a little practice activity where you're actually going to take the role of an observer as a researcher, learning a little bit about a participant's claim experience. So remember earlier, we had you brainstorm and got a few shout outs in the Whova, but some of you might have been feeling a little blank page syndrome. So we're going to see how generative research can kind of bring us into framing up that opportunity in a way that makes it a little easier even to come up with new ideas. So just know that everything we're going to share with you here has been staged, but it's very similar to actual work we might do and what the outputs might look like, and just meant to give you some practice. So as we are interviewing our research participants, we are especially listening for a few specific things. And as I mentioned before, we're really interested in digging deep into different kinds of needs that they are telling us about as through the process of doing some storytelling. So on the screen here, these are 3 different kinds of needs that we often listen for. And this is what I'm going to have you do today as you listen along to our little sample interview. So if you have a paper and pen handy, and maybe, oh, I can't really share my note. Oh, there it is. If you have a little notebook or something, you could even write functional, emotional, social on a page and help you keep track of what you're hearing. So for us, we're listening for functional needs. So that is what people need to get done. Emotional needs, that is how people feel or how people want to feel in a situation. And then also social needs, which refers to how people prefer to interact or even be perceived by others. So I'm going to play a little video clip for you. And this is our research participant here. So take some notes and listen out over the next 3 minutes.
My battery died. I couldn't start the car. So I called my auto insurance company for, I guess, emergency roadside assistance. The insurance provider that it felt like they were trying to prevent me from calling to use their customer service agent to use a live person to handle this claim, and they were trying to get me to install their app on my phone. And I resisted and insisted on calling them to get it done. And the only digital interactions I've had with the technicians were they would send me these automatic text messages when they were approaching my house, or they would call me to verify the address, which I found the text messages, as long as it was just 1 or 2 text messages, that's fine. But one of them would send me text messages every 2 minutes on their way for like an hour or so, and I kept typing stop, and there was no response. Like there was no way to stop it. It was very frustrating and very, very irritating. No, they said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm checking, and there's no way to prevent those text messages from the technicians. And then they also sent me a survey afterwards by text message. And I tried to explain to them it's very disruptive to be getting like dozens of text messages for status update for when the technician is going to get there. So yeah, I mean, that was like a annoyance. I think they said that, did you know it is much faster to file your claim using our app, or much faster and easier, something like that. The app probably answers like the basics, like, are you at home? Are you safe on a roadside? What kind of service do you need? What's your address? Such and such. But I would say that very few claims are simple enough just to be handled by an app. I think like a human should be involved there. So yeah. And I might have other questions while I'm on the phone that I would want to speak to a human about, like, is this going to affect my policy, or how long is it going to be till they be here? I'm not convinced, even without seeing the software, I'm not convinced that it's competent enough to fully address all the concerns about the claim repair interaction or an emergency service interaction. Because I feel pretty strongly about not installing third-party apps on my phone. And privacy is the big issue. Like, I know there's no guarantee anymore of any kind of privacy, even if they say, click our privacy. Basically, when they say read our privacy and confirm that you understand, means basically we're taking all your data and we're selling it to 32 other companies, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's basically what privacy means today. And so that's why I don't want to download apps, basically. And then I also see that a lot of data is being used when I look at like data usage over the month. I'm like, why did this app use 100 megabytes of data? I just used it once, so I don't know what data is going back and forth that would require 100 megabytes. So I don't need like backdoors into my like photographs or text messages or location data or driving speed by any number of companies that I have no agreement with.
All right, so that was our mock interview there. But we are wondering if you heard, listening to that, any functional, emotional, or social needs. Somebody has already set a really great example and put one that they saw in the chat. So again, this is a little interactive. If there's something that you captured, feel free to put that in the Whova chat and I can read it out, or even interrupt me and come off mute. We have a minute or so to do this. So I'll read the one we have. Wants a human touch, felt irritated, frustrated, annoyed, too many text messages, privacy concerns with downloading apps using a lot of customer data and usage. Privacy is important to her, social need, that's good. The customer wanted to feel heard and they felt pawned off to the technology instead. I love that. Functional equals start her car, perfect. Doesn't trust third-party apps. Emotional, to be listened to. Just wants the battery fixed without annoying text. Great, awesome. Those are some really good ones. And again, as we are listening out for these needs, there's not really a right or wrong answer here. Some of this is kind of subjective, but that's a little bit of what generative research analysis is like. We all bring together kind of what we've heard across many different participants that we might have interviewed on an issue. So for today's example, we just use one, but typically we'll have about 12 to 20 people that we will have talked to, and we'll be triangulating those things. So for the sake of moving forward with the example today, I'll show you a few things that we picked up on, and they align very well with some of the things that you all picked up on. So functional needs, we have receive personalized help. Emotional needs, feel trust because I'm heard and respected. and social, be in control of what I share about me. So those are just a couple examples, but I think you guys came up with even more great ones that are in the chat there. So what I'm going to do next is show how, as part of our process, what we'll do is we'll take those deep needs that we've heard and that we've kind of synthesized across all the research sessions we would have done and turn them into opportunity frames, which is what we use to then come up with all those creative ideas. So we'll take a need like receive personalized help and turn that into a frame through a tool that we call a how might we statement. So we have an example. So to receive personalized help and come up with ideas for that, we might frame that as how might we provide personalized help through a customer's preferred channel. Additionally, for the emotional need around feeling trust because I'm heard and respected, how might we ensure customers feel respected and heard in their interactions with us? So some of it kind of sounds like we're turning that need around into a how might we statement. But also, as we have many of these interviews, there's kind of different flavors that come up around these issues as well. So we tend to come up for any given need, we tend to come up with a real handful of these how might we statements that we can then use to go forward. So I'm going to keep us moving for the sake of time, but if anyone wants to put in the chat an idea for what would be a way to frame the social need into a how might we frame, I invite you to practice that part of the activity as well. But I'm going to move us on now. And so now you kind of heard how we frame up an opportunity. I'm going to hand it back to Yuen to talk through what we do next in the design process.
Thank you, Mariah. So when I reviewed the innovation process earlier, you already heard after we generate insights from the research interviews, we move on to developing ideas where we invite stakeholders to come in with us to collaborate and co-create some potential solutions for the target audience that we want to serve. So on the screen, you are seeing some screenshots and pictures of how ideations are, how ideation sessions are done. So on the left is some screenshots from a tool that we use called Miro. Since we're all many of us are working remotely, you are probably familiar with this digital whiteboard. But in this very blurred image, you can see that we have some black prompts where we have the how might we statements. So we're really asking the participants to think how might we improve a certain aspect of experience or how might we come up with a different solution completely. Then after that, participants will go into ideation session where they have typically a minute or two to doodle their ideas on the paper, and they're encouraged to use their words to describe what they're drawing on the paper. Then they will take a picture, upload them into this board. And then we'll go around on this table, which are just virtual small groups. So we'll go around the table to look at these pictures that people uploaded, have them really give a little sales pitch of their ideas and build on each other's ideas as well. Then we will use some dot voting to indicate where the enthusiasm is at this table, which ideas generated the most excitement from the group. So yeah, this is how it's done virtually, but on the right, we also have some pictures provided by Mariah. So if you were in an in-person setting, you'll see this actual physical group, tables where people are working on. So basically the same idea, you doodle, you put ideas on the table and people dot vote on the ideas that they like. So there are some ground rules that we typically introduce before we start these sessions. So we ask people to defer judgments, and this is really not where you need to be too critical about the ideas. So we're just trying to dump everything that's in our brain. So really want to foster a positive and inviting environment where creativity can really thrive. And we're always biased towards quantity. We typically give people a minute or two to doodle their ideas. So we don't need elaborate artwork. We really want people to excuse me, come up with as many ideas as possible before we start analyzing them more rigorously. And we also build on each other's ideas. Typically, we do multiple rounds of this ideation. Oftentimes, after everyone shared their ideas, we'll give them some specific prompt so we can push each other's ideas further. For example, how could you make this idea more inclusive? How could you make this idea omni-channel, things like that. And so with those prompts, we typically are able to push the ideas further and make them better. And lastly, just ask people to minimize distractions, which is really an issue in online sessions where you really can't see people's face all the time. So we encourage people to come on camera and mute their meetings and emails so they can be fully immersed in this environment. And one question you always get from participants is, why do we have to draw? Can we just talk about our ideas, or can I just type it up in an email and send it to you? So the reason why we encourage people to draw in these sessions is to help participants get into a really creative mindset. So this is a researchers conference, so all of us are probably mostly working with words, sometimes maybe PowerPoints or some graphs, diagrams, but mostly we think in a verbal way, and you can certainly get creative in that space. But we by asking people to draw, we activate another part of their brain where it's kind of different from what they typically do on a daily basis, and that helps people get more creative in these kind of sessions. And also by giving them so little time to doodle these ideas, we are preventing people from over analyzing in this stage. So later on, all these ideas are going to be clustered into different themes. We're going to really refine them and do better artwork for them, do better verbal description for them. But at this stage, we want people to quickly get their ideas out. So we find drawing to be a really good way for doing that. And also, when you do these sessions, you often end up with hundreds, it's probably exaggeration, but more than 100 ideas coming out of these sessions. So if they're all in word form, it's like, because they're all very rough ideas, they typically don't have names yet. People are still thinking about what to call them. So it's hard to identify and navigate them if they're all word-based. So by having an image attached to each idea, it's much easier for the team to sort through them later and to navigate this enormous board with all these great ideas on them. So that is why we encourage people to draw in these sessions. And if you don't consider yourself as an artist, you don't feel intimidated by this, because we're not looking for artwork here. So here we have an example for you for what level of doodle we're looking for. So here the how may we ensure customers feel respected and heard. So this is just a really simple illustration of how the customer service representatives can be trained to do in reflective listening so that the customers feel heard and respected. So this simple stick figures is all we need in this kind of sessions. Yeah, so initially we were hoping that we can actually draw together. And so we had this how may we for you that we can illustrate and kind of come up with some creative ideas for. But we also want to respect your time and leave some room for question and answers. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them in a chat or just come on mute.
And I do see a couple questions that are in the Q&A already, and I know we're short on time. And I might try to even answer both questions at once if I can. So I'm gonna read out the question, and I'll give it a start and see if Yuen has wants to jump in as well. Is that all right, Pete?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I threw a couple questions in there, but they're related, so I think you could do them together.
Okay, great. So the questions we heard earlier about when to use different types of qualitative research. Would you ever use a focus group for generative research? So that's one question. And the other is, given insurance companies are full of actuaries, how do you respond to the criticism that you did a lot of work based on what 12 people said? And for both of those, I would focus on the idea that for generative research, what we focus on doing is really hearing in-depth stories that people will tell us about their actual experiences. And we often probe deeply into those functional, emotional, and social needs. And thus, sessions can be a bit personal, they can be a bit emotional. And it's really hard to get to the bottom of social and emotional needs and things like that when somebody feels like they're in a group of people and they might not be as open to being vulnerable in a space like that. Whereas in the way that we kind of conduct that qualitative research is often very personable and very personal. And we do get to hear their kind of full stories and how they're feeling. So whereas you could use focus groups for this, absolutely. We tend to find that people are just more comfortable to share with us in a space where it's a little bit more one-on-one. And with that, talking about well, it's just 12 people. What do you learn from that? Criticism, I would counter that with the value that we get from going in depth with those. I would say it tends to be 12 to 20 people, and hearing those real stories gets us to that place Ewan was mentioning earlier, where we're really building empathy for those actual experiences that happen. We're discovering things that we wouldn't have known to ask about in a research method, such as doing a survey or something like that, or analyzing large data pools, where you have to know the question before you can ask it. When we do this kind of qualitative research or different research methods within the generative modality, often we don't need to know all of our questions, because some of them kind of come up in the sessions as well. So we have to balance there, kind of how many participants we talk to versus how in depth we can go and how much time we spend with them. If we could spend months and months doing 50 in-depth interviews with participants, would that create much more value to us, or would there just be, diminishing returns at a certain point? I think that the sort of needs that we are uncovering here, since they're deeper level needs and not as much the kind of surface level functional needs where there's a lot of diversity, we do tend to hear overlap and kind of synthesis on those needs after about 12 interviews. To be honest, I think that's kind of where we hit some diminishing returns in this modality.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think it's very important to not create a sense of competition between the qualitative researchers and the quantitative researchers. Really want to encourage collaboration. And so the qualitative researchers using the quantitative data that has been collected, also inviting quantitative researchers to sit in these interview sessions to really hear the stories, hearing about the why under the statistics or the patterns that we're looking for. And also, I think when communicating with people who are more used to quantitative work, it's important to respect their expertise and also communicate the fact that different research has different goals. So for example, in qualitative research, we're not really looking for generalizability. So we look for some level of representativeness, but we're not trying to say that these 12 people can, what these 12 people told us can be generalized to the entire population. And another thing we do is we go back and forth between qualitative and quantitative method, and in some steps we combine them together. So for example, in Sense and Scan, we talk to people, but we also look at industry reports where the statistics show us the story as well. So we really want to combine these two views to tell a full story. So speaking each other's language and try to encourage collaboration instead of competition, I think is very important in this kind of work.
Okay, I agree with all of your answers there. I know I asked the question. So I just wanted to say thank you. And, I think you're probably both open if people wanted to reach out if they had additional questions. but we're kind of at the end, so
Yep,
appreciate
absolutely.
appreciate all you did here. I really appreciate how you tried to make it as interactive as possible in the in the virtual environment as well. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, well, we hope you all had fun and thank you for your time today. We enjoyed presenting and working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to the next session, which is we've got a 30-minute break. And then operationalizing intelligence tracking is at 2 o'clock.